Good morning. Welcome to the King's Report News Hour for the 25th day in the 11th month by the heavenly calendar and the 16th year of Cheongi. Tim Miller sitting in for the second king of Cheongguk, and we have quite an extraordinary story today. Uh, Historic, I would say, historic. I think 50 years from now, people will definitely be talking about this, and not in a good way. But first, let's do our usual. Let's take our trip around the kingdom. Right now, it is 27 degrees at Chongpyeong, Tennessee. I'm a little bit sort of, maybe even in shock. Although I've known about this now for several hours, but still, the shock does not go away easily because it's quite an extraordinary story. Anyway, 27 degrees at Chongpyeong, Tennessee, under clear skies. Sunshine today, high of 55 degrees. Tonight, mainly clear and low of 37. And then at the well, in father's hometown, I'm trying to maintain focus here. Father's hometown of Cheongju in Pyongan province, and yeah, I wonder if I have the right one here. Anyway, okay, 6 degrees right now in Cheongju, and um, under clear skies, and the really bitter cold, the dangerous cold, I would say, is continuing there. The real feel right now is 0 degrees, and tonight the actual temperature is going to get down to 4 degrees below zero on the Fahrenheit scale. And that, of course, is minus 20 on the Celsius scale. Tomorrow, overcast and cold, high of just 22 degrees. So, really, people there I suspect, are suffering a great deal. And at the at the Turnagain Palace in northeast Pennsylvania, currently 23 degrees and clear. Sunshine mixing with some clouds, breezy this afternoon, high of 45. Tonight, shower in the area late, and it's going to be a high of 33 degrees. Oh, I'm sorry, low of 33 degrees tonight. Liberty Rock RV Park and Campground in Limestone County, Texas, cloudy and 42 degrees, partly sunny, becoming breezy this afternoon with a passing shower. High of 60 degrees there today, and tonight a passing shower in the evening. Otherwise mainly clear, low of 40 degrees. And at the Suncheon Palace in Korea, clear and 33 degrees right now, getting down to 19 degrees tonight, clear and colder. And tomorrow, increasing cloudiness, high of 51. At the Gunma Palaces in Japan, mostly clear and 49. And tonight, partly cloudy, 32. And tomorrow, partly sunny, high of 50. Guangzhou, Guangdong Province, clear and 72 degrees right now. Clear skies continuing through the night, 56 degrees for a low. Hazy sun tomorrow, very warm, high of 78. Okay, let's go to Father's word. Yes, here we go. Yes, True Love, the book of True Love, and chapter 1, section 3. And this is the paragraph I'm led to this evening, or this morning. 사람은 취해 살아야 합니다. That's interesting. He says that people should live in a state of intoxication. You got that right, yes. 사람은 취해 살아야 합니다. People should live in a state of intoxication. Yes. 취해서 사는 사람이 행복한 사람입니다. The person who lives intoxicated is a happy person. Okay. I guess we can agree with that. 예술가들은, of course, when he says intoxicated, maybe he's not using it in the same sense as some people might use it. 예술가들은 예술에 취해 삽니다. Artists live in a state of live intoxicated in art. I see. Okay. 문학을 하는 사람들은 자기가 구상하는 책을 쓰든가 어떤 명작에 취해서 합니다. So people who do literature uh, uh, 쓴다든가, either write their own book, write a book that they have conceived, or they live in a state of being intoxicated in a literary masterpiece. 그런 사람들이 행복한 사람입니다. Those people are happy people. Okay. 그렇기 때문에 인간의 사지백제는 입체적인 하나님의 이상적인 사랑에 취해 살아야 하고 그분만 따라다녀야 합니다. And so, yes, and I think you can understand where he's going with this. And so, the the human body, he says, 사지백제. That's another way of just saying the human body. Um, the human body must 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 live in a state of intoxication with God's ideal love and must follow only him. Okay, that's where he was going. And I pointed out a number of times in the Cheongguk national anthem, Cheongguk national anthem in verse 4. There are the two lines in Korean in the verse 4, which unfortunately did not make it into the translation exactly. There's kind of a similar something in the same ballpark. No, I would say in the same golf course, not really in the same ballpark. But it is by his grace. Let's see here. Okay. I need to find a copy of that. The second line is, it is by his grace that I'm intoxicated in love. And I can't find it. Let's see here. Anyway, it is by his grace that I am intoxicated in love. And I guess, in English, the word intoxicated didn't sound so poetic or something. I don't know. They've got something else in there. But you can look at verse 4 of the Cheongguk national anthem. But that's what it's supposed to be. Well, that's what it is originally. And this is why, of course, people should learn Korean. Don't blame the translators, whoever it was. It was not me. Don't blame the translators, because translations of Father's words or holy songs are just, they're kind of a crutch to be used until people learn Korean, right? Or you could say they're kind of a training wheels, you can say. So don't blame the crutch, don't blame the training wheels. Instead, get busy and learn Korean. Anyway, you can look it up and you can see what it is supposed to be. Okay, but it is by his grace that I'm intoxicated in love is the original verse there. All right. So let's go to that quite extraordinary article that I'm looking at here. And this is it right here. President Lee, of course, that's Lee Jae-myung of Korea, agrees with religious leaders to dissolve Unification Church and Shincheonji. Now, and here they even have a photograph of themselves for the sake of history. And yeah, I think this headline and this photograph are going to remain in history, and not in a good way. Not in a good way. All right. This is really, I think it's quite shocking that in a country that purportedly a democratic country, which has a constitution that allows freedom of religion, and the Constitution allowing freedom of religion doesn't mean a whole lot, frankly, because even in North Korea, I think the Constitution, I think, says something about freedom of religion, or in China also. I mean, they can always pay lip service, right, to freedom of religion. And as I always said, eventually, when it gets down to it, the Constitution of any particular country only says what the Supreme Court says it says. And so here, this group, this cabal, I would say, of established religions, meeting with the president, okay, meeting with the political leader, are asking the political leader to shut down a couple of religious organizations, religious bodies in South Korea. And why is that? Well, it's because these religious bodies are accused of trying to influence politics. Now, do you see the irony here? They're asking the political leader to shut down religious groups that have engaged in influencing politics. Do you see the irony here? The hypocrisy. Do you see the hypocrisy here, right? This is just extraordinary. And they even took a photograph of themselves for the sake of history. Oh my goodness, this is just shocking on so many levels. Now, now, to be sure, um, I'm not I'm not threatened by this. Okay, I'm not, I'm not going to jail anytime soon, even though I'm living in South Korea. Okay, because, and let's go through history, right? Um, Rome tried to shut down Christianity. Does Christianity still exist today? Yes. Does Rome still exist today? No. so, so the historical record suggests that governments trying to shut down religions don't have a lot of luck. I think their record is not very good. Uh, even the Japanese religious group, the Aum Shinrikyo, that conducted sarin gas terrorist attack on the Japanese subway system. Not only the Japanese subway system, but actually they went around spraying sarin gas in some places and killed. They actually killed people with this sarin gas. People actually died. And of course, the government arrested the leaders, and I think their leaders were either uh, they may have been executed. Actually, I have to go back and check. That group still exists. Even that group still exists. Of course, their religious corporation status was dissolved, but they still exist under a different name. And yes, under a different name. But the people who were part of that group formed another group, and they still exist out there. So shutting down religions is not an easy task. Now, North Korea did it pretty extensively. How did they do it? Well, they first got the established religious groups to accuse Father, right, of disturbing the peace. And I don't think they accused him of trying to influence politics, but they accused him of disturbing the peace. Okay, and so the North Korean government, being put up by Stalin and Kim Il Sung's government, used the established religious organizations to first put Father in jail, to find reason to put Father in jail, and then he went on to put the other religions in jail as well, to get rid of the other religions as well as time went on. And now, and now, how many years later is it? 75? I don't know. Anyway, several decades later, we see the same thing happening in South Korea. All right. The government is using the established religions first of all to dissolve the Unification Church and another one called Shincheonji. They can understand why this is quite an extraordinary event, and these people there have the unmitigated gall to actually stand there and have their picture taken. It's like bank robbers, stopping to have their picture taken as they're exiting the bank with the money. I mean, yes. when the trial occurs in the day of judgment, this photograph will be evidence number one. These people are really the hypocrisy of it all. The hypocrisy of it all. Oh my goodness! Here. Anyway, let's read the article just for fun. President Lee Jae-myung hosted a luncheon meeting with leaders from seven, okay, seven, yes, major religious groups, meaning established religious groups, all right? Buddhism, Protestantism, Catholicism, Won Buddhism, Confucianism, Chondoism, and ethnic religions. At Cheongwadae, that's the presidential residence, on the 12th, on January 12th. During the meeting, when religious leaders raised issues regarding the Unification Church in Shincheonji, and by the way, the Family Federation is not the Unification Church, as I've explained already. But anyway, the media cannot make such distinctions, so let's just we'll go on right here. Raised issues regarding the Unification Church and Shincheonji. President Lee stated, all right, the president stated the harm caused is very significant, according to Kang Yoo-jung, a Chongwade spokesperson. So this is official. This is official. This is not a leak. It's official. In a written briefing, Kang Yoo-jung noted that President Lee and the religious leaders exchanged opinions on topics including the Unification Church and Shincheonji issues, diplomatic achievements from his visit to Beijing, low birth rates, balanced regional development, and improving inter-Korean relations. The religious leaders reportedly emphasized the damage caused by pseudo-religions and heresies like the Unification Church in Shincheonji is severe, and urged these groups which go beyond collusion between religion and politics, and right now they're colluding with the political leader, go beyond collusion between religion and politics to inflict significant harm on citizens' lives must be addressed strictly. Significant harm on citizens' lives. I'm sorry, what? I'm sorry, what? Significant harm on citizens' lives? Okay, yes. Especially Shincheonji right now is a very fast-growing religion. It's actually a Christian religion. And okay, yes, some of their beliefs are strange. They believe that their founder and leader is never going to die, that he's going to remain physically alive for eternity. So, okay, yeah, but we can disagree. We can disagree. But anyway, we don't call for them to be dissolved, right? Must be addressed strictly. In response, President Lee expressed agreement, stating, "This is a truly difficult subject, but the harm to our society has been neglected for too long, and the damage is now very significant," Kang Yoo-jung relayed. The attending religious leaders then requested dissolving religious groups that harm the nation and its people would likely receive public consensus. In other words, they're telling the president that this is going to get you votes, right? It's going to get you votes. And added, we also asked the government to consider using the assets. So take away their assets of problematic religious foundations to support victims of pseudo religions. to support victims of pseudo religions. I tell you, this is just victims of pseudo religions. Oh my goodness. Okay. All right. According to Chongwade, the religious leaders praised President Lee for addressing anti-Chinese sentiments and hate issues, stating hate toward migrants is becoming a breeding ground for fascism, and many citizens would agree with proposals to break away from hatred. Earlier in his opening remarks before the luncheon, President Lee remarked, as many people feel, conflicts, hatred, and animosity seems to have increased significantly. Let's see, hatred and animosity towards Unification Church in Shincheonji. Oh no. That's okay. That is okay. Okay. That does not lead to fascism. The hypocrisy is just so, oh my goodness, it's so thick. You can cut it with a knife. And added, while the president's most important task is to unite the people, efforts are being made, but there are many limitations. You're going to unite the people against the Unification Church and Shincheonji. Am I getting this right? I think so, right? Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. So here we go. Here's the list of culprits here. These are the bank robbers. Attendees from the Buddhist community included Venerable Jin-U, Venerable Doksu, and Hasanji, and so here we go, and so forth and so on. So all the names of the people who attended so that they could be, brought to justice later on in the courts of Cheongguk. This is extraordinary. This photograph. We're gonna have to save this photograph, all right, because this is going to be an important historic photograph. for the future. Yes. So we'll see. 50 years from now, what will happen? Where will these religions be? And where will the Unification Church be? The real Unification Church. My goodness, my goodness, my goodness. All right. Okay. Enough excitement over that. I just can't stop looking at this photograph because it is just really, really the hypocrisy, the uh, the hypocrisy. Okay. Now, meanwhile, in Tehran, let's go see what's going on in Tehran. Yeah, they're still going in Tehran. And let's take a look at Al Jazeera here. They have an ongoing live updates. Okay. Hundreds are being killed. The UN says hundreds are killed, and the violence is horrific. And I'm sure that's true. But as I've said, the Iranians have to pay the price for their freedom, and unfortunately, that is uh, necessary in many cases, and this is certainly one of those cases. UN Human Rights Chief Volker Turk says hundreds have been killed in weeks of demonstrations, and he's horrified by the violence against the people of Iran. And meanwhile, Iran's foreign minister tells Al Jazeera, if Washington wants to test the military option it has tested before, we are ready for it. And tens of thousands of pro-government demonstrators took to the streets in a show of force after weeks of deadly protests. This is pro-government demonstrators, as Iran continues to be cut off from the internet for a fifth straight day. And apparently, even in some areas of the country, not only the internet for the world, but even the internet, the intra-national internet, in other words, so banks, for example, people cannot get their money out of banks because the banks have been knocked offline, and and people are having difficulty that way. More than 100 security personnel have been killed in recent days. Iran's state media report, while opposition activists say the death toll is higher and includes hundreds of protesters. Al Jazeera cannot independently verify these figures, and I'm glad that Al Jazeera is being honest about that. And because no one actually is able to verify these figures, we just know that hundreds have been killed. God certainly knows, because He knows every child of His that has died, and God is certainly agonizing over this situation. And we hope that it can end as quickly as possible. And also, Iran cracks down on Musk's Starlink terminals. So even Musk tried to restore the internet in Iran by making the Starlink available. But Iranian forces are confiscating Starlink dishes in Tehran amid a total internet blockade in the country, a news report says. It's electronic warfare. Amir Rashidi, director of digital rights and security at the U.S.-based Mian Group, told the Wall Street Journal. Some Iranians have been using Elon Musk's Starlink service to communicate with the outside world, but the co-founder at Net Freedom Pioneers told the newspaper that the crackdown has slowed people from using Starlink, but not entirely halted the effort. Starlink terminals began showing up in Iran during the last significant demonstrations in 2022, the Journal reported. Iran's internet has now been cut for 5 days for its 90 million people to control violent demonstrations, authorities say. Some international phone services began sporadically working again earlier on Tuesday. And I suspect that satellite phones should be working because they connect directly with satellites and do not require a network. But anyway, I don't know about that. Iranians going through economic hardship, but understand this is a security issue. And let's see here, assistant professor at the University of Tehran says she does not expect Trump's tariff announcement to have a very significant effect on Iran because the country has been under crippling U.S. sanctions for many years. And she's referring to, I think Trump is saying that he's putting a 25% tariff on any country that does business with Iran now. And that's one of the things that I think that he's considering to do right now. And accusing Germany of double standards. What else do we have here? Malala Yousafzai. She is from Pakistan, right? Anyway, she won the Nobel Prize a few years back. Um, she was for, yeah. Here we go. She was awarded the Nobel Prize in 2014 at the age of 17 for her fight for girls' education in her home country, Pakistan. That's her. And they're arresting Israel-linked terrorist groups. So they're blaming outside forces. Okay? And UN Rights Office concerned over proposed death penalty for protesters. And Qatar warns of a catastrophic results of Iran-U.S. escalation and so forth. Okay. So now President Trump today is being briefed on the military options. At least that's what we're told. That's what's going to happen later today. And let's look at some of those options here with ABC News. After declaring Iran was in big trouble and close to crossing a red line over its crackdown on anti-government protests, members of President Donald Trump's national security team are expected to meet at the White House on Tuesday to discuss his options for intervention in the Islamic Republic. One U.S. official tells ABC News that among the options under consideration are new sanctions against key regime figures um, or against Iran's energy or banking sectors. Okay. In an online post Monday, Trump said he was already prepared to impose a 25% tariff against any country doing business with Iran. So prepared to, right? So he hasn't done it yet, or on any and all business being done with the United States of America. So those countries doing business with Iran, if they're also doing business with the U.S., then he's going to put a 25% tariff on the business with the U.S. Okay. And former U.S. officials say other options are likely to land on the president. Range from large-scale military attacks to more targeted strikes on specific Iranian leaders or police infrastructure that have helped the Iranian government allegedly violently put down protests. The U.S. also is likely to consider cyber attacks against the government, as well as online influence operations aimed at boosting the messaging of protesters online. Well, I don't think, I'm sorry, what? They're offline, though. So how are you going to do that? And undermining the Iranian government. Okay. I guess maybe the local national intranet, insofar as it's still working. I think one thing President Trump is very good at is always keeping all of his options on the table, and airstrikes would be one of the many, many options on the table for the commander in chief. Diplomacy is always the first option for the president, White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt told reporters on Monday. At the same time, Leavitt said the Iran regime's public messaging is different from the private messaging being communicated to the White House. I think the president has an interest in exploring those messages. However, with that said, the president has shown he's unafraid to use military options if and when he deems it necessary. Well, we'll see how this works out. Okay, we'll see how it works out. Okay. Of course, the United States also had some help from France in dealing with the British during the War of Independence. Um, but of course, the main burden was borne by Americans, and I think also, so in the case of Iran, also the main burden certainly needs to be borne by Iranians themselves, and the United States can only be kind of a secondary, or not even just secondary, but even tertiary role, as small a role as possible, as small a role as possible. If there's something that could pinpoint some pinpoint attack or something like that that can be done that will have a large effect on the outcome of the protests, that would be good. But then, people are beginning to ask, okay, but what happens if the current regime falls? Who's going to rule instead of them? And frankly, it'll be whoever controls the military and the IRGC, the Revolutionary Guard Corps. Who's going to control the guns, in other words? And that could be another set of mullahs, right? So we need to keep our expectations low, or shall we say, within reason. Okay. All right. Um, the credit card thing, as you know, I like to highlight people who agree with me. Okay. Okay. So, so yes, sure enough, people are beginning to agree with me that this actually is not a good idea. Okay. President Trump has said that beginning January 20th, uh, no credit card should charge a more than 10% annual interest. And I've been saying that this is a bad idea because it basically amounts to government price fixing, and that's never a good idea. Government involvement in markets is always bad because it always distorts the market. And here, yes, Trump warned credit card crackdown will trigger financial crisis for millions. Absolutely, yes. A lot of people are going to lose their credit cards because the credit card companies will say, you know what, you're not you're not a good risk at 10%. We need to charge you 15% or 20%. The government is not allowing us to do that. So I'm sorry, we're going to cancel your credit card. That's going to happen. And apparently, President Trump, I don't know, did he skip Econ 101 when he was in college? I don't know. Donald Trump's crackdown on credit cards risks pushing millions of poor Americans into financial crisis, some of Wall Street's most powerful groups have warned. And I know these people are, tooting their own horn. In other words, they don't want this to happen because their business will be hurt. But and yet there's a pretty big kernel of truth here. It's more than a kernel. It's very true. Mr. Trump is pressing ahead with plans to temporarily cap credit card interest rates for 12 months at 10% from January 20th. And people are going to say, yay, that's great, except the people who are saying that may lose their credit cards. However, the proposal is facing a backlash over fears it will force banks to cancel cards and pull back lending to consumers with the lowest credit scores. On Monday, the American Bankers Association, which represents major lenders like JP Morgan, hedge fund billionaire Bill Ackman, and Bank Policy Institute all rounded on Mr. Trump over the plan. Mr. Ackman, who has publicly supported Mr. Trump, added, my concern about capping rates at 10% is that doing so will inevitably cause millions of Americans to have their credit cards canceled as credit card companies lose the ability to adequately price subprime credit risk. Consumers denied credit cards will be forced to turn to loan sharks whose rates and terms will be vastly worse for borrowers. This is absolutely true. They'll have to go to what is it called, a payday loan or what is it, companies or something like that, right? Which charge a whole lot more than even 20% or even a whole lot more than 30%, I think. The BPI said the cap would be devastating for millions of American families and small business owners, the very consumers this proposal intends to help. The ABA said the move would push consumers towards less regulated, more costly alternatives. Mr. Trump's announcement sent shares of U.S. credit card providers sliding on Monday, with Capital One leading, the fallers plunging by as much as 6.24%. Okay. So the credit card companies are their stock price is going down, which that doesn't really concern us too much. But in the UK, as much as £8 billion was wiped off the market value of British banks. Shares of Barclays, which has a U.S. credit card business, fell by 3.3% in London, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The plan has stoked widespread fears because credit cards are so vital for the U.S. economy, with the number of accounts hitting a record 642 million in the third quarter of 2025. That's about twice the U.S. population, including little infants, little babies, which who probably don't have any credit cards. Although I wouldn't, I wouldn't be so sure. But this means the U.S. has nearly twice as many credit cards accounts as it does people. Total credit card debt is about $1.23 trillion, up 39% since the pandemic began. In theory, capping at 10% should dramatically reduce borrowers' costs because it would more than halve the average rate paid, which was 22.5% in November. Right. So, some people, if they have, some people have other options. For example, if someone has a home, then they will be able to borrow against the equity of the home, right? And for what do they call it? A home equity line of credit, right? HELOC, home equity line of credit. That's an option for someone who owns a home and has a certain amount of equity in the home. And you know what this may do, though? Um, you know what this may do is it may encourage the development of what they call DeFi, or anyway, for example, there are companies that offer loans that are backed by Bitcoin. In other words, if you need, let's say you need $1,000, then you can put down $2,000 worth of Bitcoin as collateral, and they will send you $1,000. And one of the advantages of those loans is that there's no credit check. There's no credit check. The reason that banks and credit card companies do credit checks is because for one thing, credit cards are unsecured. In other words, there is no collateral that is that the banks are holding for the credit card loan, and so that's why the risk is somewhat higher for them, because there's no collateral there. But also, even with homes, to get a home mortgage, you have to go through a credit check, right? And they pull your credit report and look at what other loans you have, and they look at your payment, how well you've done in paying and stuff like that. But with Bitcoin-backed loans, there is no credit check, as far as I know, in most cases. And that's because the Bitcoin collateral is extremely liquid. In other words, if in a mortgage situation, if you don't pay, then your house goes to the bank. The bank gets the collateral, which is the house, right? But what's the bank going to do with a house? And they say, what are we going to do with a house? We're not a real estate company, right? And to sell a house, you fix it up, you have to put it on the market, and there are all sorts of costs involved with selling a house. So we'd rather not have to sell a house. So that's why we only want to give mortgages to people who we think are going to have high chance of repaying the mortgage loan. But with Bitcoin, there are no such difficulties. You know, if the person defaults on the loan, then the bank or the person, actually it's a company, it's not a bank, but it's a company, will get the Bitcoin, and then just like that, they can sell the Bitcoin at market price. Just boom, within 5 minutes or less, even 5 seconds, because of the high level of liquidity of Bitcoin. So this may encourage the growth of those types of loans. And this may actually encourage the move away from traditional banking to sort of this type of Bitcoin or cryptocurrency-based banking, what they call DeFi banking, or DeFi finance. DeFi, actually, the Fi in DeFi is finance, and so decentralized finance, shall we say? Yeah. So we'll see. This is it's a bad idea, cutting limiting the economically, from an economic point of view, it's a foolish idea. From a political point of view, it may be good, although cutting poor people off from their credit cards probably is not a very good political move. But anyway, we'll see what happens, and we'll see what the unintended consequences of this eventually are. Things always have unintended consequences, and this may be one of those that has many of those unintended consequences. All right. All right, let's go to another story. Mexico. President Trump is saying that he's going to do some land operations in Mexico. And as you might suspect, President Sheinbaum is not sold on the idea. Now, this headline writer actually got it wrong. It makes it sound as though Mexico is going to invade the United States. But this sometimes headline writers are, they're half asleep or something. They make these mistakes. Sometimes it's quite humorous. But anyway, yeah, this is wrong. So don't worry. Mexico is not about to invade the United States. The opposite is true. Let's take a look here. Mexico's President Claudia Sheinbaum sternly rejected Donald Trump's suggestion to send U.S. troops to Mexico to perform anti-drug cartel missions, clarifying that option is, quote, not on the table. She claimed to have informed Trump that the deployment of U.S. troops in Mexico was not on the table. We spoke about various topics, including security with respect to for our sovereignties, reducing drug trafficking, trade and investment, Sheinbaum said on social media. The approximately 15-minute call came after Sheinbaum said Friday she had requested dialogue with the Trump administration at the end of a week in which he had said he was ready to confront drug cartels on the ground and repeated the accusation that cartels were running Mexico. And this, of course, is the opinion of many security experts. Of course, Sheinbaum denies it, but of course she would deny it. Trump has repeatedly offered to send the U.S. military after the cartels, and Sheinbaum has always declined. But after the U.S. removal of Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro, Trump's comments about Mexico, Cuba, and Greenland carried new weight. Trump asked me my opinion about what they had done in Venezuela, and I told him very clearly that our Constitution is very clear that we do not agree with interventions, and that was it, Sheinbaum said. Trump still insisted that if we ask for it, they can help with military forces, which Sheinbaum said that she again rejected. We told him so far it's going very well. It's not necessary. And furthermore, there is Mexico's sovereignty and territorial integrity, and he understood. In an interview with Fox News aired last Thursday, Trump said, we've knocked out 97% of the drugs coming in by water, and we are going to start now hitting land with regard to the cartels. The cartels are running Mexico. It's very sad to watch. Sheinbaum said Monday the two leaders agreed to continue working together. Mexico's Foreign Affairs Secretary Juan Ramon de la Fuente spoke Sunday with his U.S. counterpart, Secretary of State Marco Rubio. He asked for tangible results and more cooperation to dismantle the cartels, according to a statement from the U.S. State Department. Sheinbaum said Mexico shared those results, including a significant drop in homicides, falling U.S. fentanyl seizures, and fentanyl overdose deaths. Experts still see U.S. intervention in Mexico as unlikely because Mexico is doing what the U.S. asks and is a critical economic partner, but expect Trump to continue using such rhetoric to maintain pressure on Mexico to do more. Sheinbaum said the two leaders did not speak about Cuba, which Trump threatened Sunday. Mexico is an important ally of the island nation, including selling it oil that it will need even more desperately now that the Trump administration says it will not allow any more oil shipments from Venezuela to Cuba. Okay, so we'll see. And Sheinbaum is in a very, I would say, difficult, perhaps precarious position. She's always having to, on the one hand, fight off the cartels, on the other hand, trying to keep President Trump from invading her country or, doing military operations in her country, which, from a perspective of sovereignty, you can understand that although Colombia does allow the U.S. forces to go in there and to help Colombia sort of tamp down the poppy harvesting and so forth, but which is, of course, poppy is, of course, where the cocaine comes from, heroin comes from. Anyway, so we will see how this continues. And even politically, domestically in the United States, I think President Trump would be taking a pretty big risk by doing land operations in Mexico. It's different. People, the Venezuelans in America, are very happy about President Trump snatching Maduro from his bed and bringing him to the United States. They're very, they're dancing in the streets and all that. But I think the reaction towards a U.S. military operation in Mexico will be quite different among Mexican citizens and also Mexican Americans in the United States. I suspect. My feeling is that they will not look at it in the same light as at all as what Venezuelans are seeing the Maduro situation, right? Anyway, we'll see. But still, there's no talk. There's no talk of cutting demand in the United States. What are we going to do to reduce demand for these drugs in the United States? I don't see anyone asking that question, at least not at the federal government level. Of course, there are many groups that are working, and maybe it's better that this is done by private groups, but the federal government could support those groups, and I think President Trump could be doing much more in terms of demand reduction, uh, reducing the consumption. And how would you do that? Well, one way to do that would be to support stronger families. Support stronger families. Some stuff has been done in the past with regard to the doctors that overprescribe these painkillers but that's not really the biggest part of the problem. The biggest part of the problem is the black market, which doesn't anyway, which is related, of course, to overprescription, to the pain management problem. But we will see how this continues to develop. Okay. All right, let's see here. Let's see, Fox right now is coming out with a story. Trump has 3 strike options that would aid the protesters and devastate Iran. I don't know. I don't like this. I don't like this at all. Strike options. Okay. Also, Jack Smith, the former special counsel who, is trying to undermine President Trump, is going to be testifying in Congress soon. So there's some stories on that, but that's a video. I cannot show that. And let's see, Supreme Court weighs state ban on trans student athletes. Yeah, okay. Let's take a look at that. There's something happening in that area today. So diving into a contentious social issue, let me get rid of this black band that you may be seeing, King. The Supreme Court on Tuesday considers whether states can ban transgender athletes from taking part in girls' and women's school and college sports. Of course, we're talking about men pretending to be women, right? Boys pretending to be girls. The court, which has a 6-3 conservative majority, will hear oral arguments in separate cases involving 2 transgender students who challenged state bans in West Virginia and Idaho, respectively. Both won lower court injunctions that allowed them to continue to compete in sports. And one of those people, a 15-year-old high school sophomore, has taken puberty-blocking medication and estrogen and competed in cross-country shot put and discus. The West Virginia law would ban this person from competing for, let's say, his school as a girl, and I am the girl I've always known myself to be, he said in a video message shared by his lawyers. Let's be careful about the gender we have here. I play for my school for the same reasons other kids on my track team do. To make friends, have fun, and challenge myself through practice and teamwork, and all I've ever wanted is the same opportunities as my peers, he added. And then the other person here, a 25-year-old college student, has received testosterone suppression and estrogen supplements. He successfully tried out for track and cross-country teams in college and has since participated in running and club soccer. An additional wrinkle in this case is that he is no longer competing in any sports covered by the ban and wants to drop out of the case in part because of the public scrutiny. The court is tackling two related legal questions: whether such laws violate the 14th Amendment of the Constitution, which requires that the law apply equally to everyone, or Title IX of the Education Amendments of 1972, which prohibits sex discrimination in education. And I bet in 1972, they never imagined, they never imagined that Title IX would be used to justify boys competing in girls' sports. The eventual ruling is likely to have nationwide implications, not just for the 25 other states with similar bans, but potentially other policies that affect transgender people, such as restroom access. And it should. It should. The states argue that the laws do not discriminate on the basis of transgender status, but are instead a legitimate sex-based classification that is allowed under Title IX to protect girls and women. Well, come on. Let's check their, you know, uh, uh, legitimate sex-based classification. Yeah. I mean, based on what? Based on what? Just because a boy, just because he's got, two sort of breasts that are larger than they're supposed to be, doesn't make him a girl. And anyway, cutting and pasting just does not change your sex. It reflects the fact that, as Idaho's lawyers put it in court papers, men are faster, stronger, bigger, more muscular, and have more explosive power than women. Yeah. Yikes. Yeah. The court's conservative majority delivered a major blow to transgender rights last year when it upheld a Tennessee law that bans gender transition care for minors. Bans transition care for minors. Okay. It also delivered further losses by allowing President Donald Trump this term to bar transgender people from the military and restrict gender designations on passports. In other words, it used to be that you could have three gender designations: M, F, and X, right? And they did away with the X. Yeah. Earlier in 2020, the court surprisingly ruled that Title VII, the federal law prohibiting discrimination in employment, applies to gender identity as well as sexual orientation. All right, let's see here. Some sports organizations, including the NCAA and the U.S. Olympic and Paralympic Committee, have already imposed new restrictions on transgender athletes. What was it? Back in the day, I don't know when this was, but 70s, 80s, even before that, of course, women in the Olympics had to had to take tests to demonstrate that they were actually women. In other words, I think they were testing the estrogen level or something like that. And remember, there were some cases where a woman later, after winning the medal, turned out not to have as much, not to have enough estrogen or something like that, and so she was not allowed to actually win the medal or something like that. I remember something like that happening probably back in the 60s or 70s. But somehow that has changed completely. Trump, an outspoken opponent of transgender rights, I think there's no such thing as transgender rights. Anyway, issued an executive order soon after taking office last year titled "Keep Men Out of Women's Sports," and his administration has sided with the states in the Supreme Court case. Right. Okay. All right. Yes, I'm glad that he's siding with the states there on that case. Let's see what else we got here. What is this? New York Post says hundreds of murdered Iranian protesters found shot in head and neck during historic protests. Again, I don't know if they've actually verified these, and it may be true. I wouldn't be surprised if it's true. Okay. But these numbers can get exaggerated. That is also true. Okay. And There's some articles this morning on President Trump's, the DOJ's investigation into Jerome Powell. And the media is covering or trying to uncover some sort of a secret weapon that the Americans may have used, the military may have used during its abduction or what not abduction, but arrest, I guess we're supposed to say, of a Maduro. A sonic weapon. Mhm. Which now, who is this? This is CNN saying that the Pentagon or the military may have purchased this weapon online. And it may be something that the communists have been using against Americans in what's called the Havana syndrome. Anyway, it's interesting. Okay, these are interesting things. Okay, let's take a look at the Epic Times. We don't have much time left, but see what they're doing this morning. Let me bring this up for you. Okay. U.S. Treasury hosts a G7 talks on rare earth supply chain risks. Japan works to diversify critical mineral supplies in face of China curbs, Prime Minister says. Okay. And Marxist network behind pro-Maduro anti-ICE protest faces congressional scrutiny. Yes, yes, yes. Yes, this is right. Okay. Answer Coalition declared on social media a day of action on January 3rd. The coalition's national director, Brian Becker, after taking part in the New York protest, appeared in a segment on Chinese state media. CGTN, a registered foreign agent with the Department of Justice, to condemn the U.S. move. The United States, he said, might be considered a rogue nation at this point, so forth and so on. And also the Party for Socialism and Liberation, another group in the network, on January 9 shared a poster depicting Trump as holding cash in one hand and oil in the other, with an ICE agent kneeling next to him. The activities of the groups are now facing scrutiny in Congress, with lawmakers pointing to their connections to a pro-Beijing U.S. millionaire, Neville Roy Singham. And we keep seeing this guy's name come up, right? Who lives in Shanghai and has appeared alongside Chinese officials in at least one forum that promotes the regime's agenda. So this guy, they call him a millionaire, not a billionaire. I hope that's true. But he's funding all sorts of anti-U.S. groups in the U.S. while he lives in Shanghai. And why can't he be shut down? It would seem to be pretty easy for them to. I mean, come on, the banks are closing down people's accounts, right? Why not this guy's account? Why are they closing down the accounts of conservatives, but not closing this guy's account, who is clearly operating against the interest of the United States? He is definitely someone that is anti-American in ideology, and regardless of where you might stand, even on topics like Israel versus Palestine, is funding certain groups that actually sow discord in this country with no efforts to actually resolve the issues, only to get us to fight one another, said Representative Anna Paulina Luna, Republican of Florida, during a House Oversight Committee meeting on January 7th. She proposed a motion to subpoena Singham and hold him in contempt of Congress if he fails to answer it. The motion passed after a voice vote. Luna asked about the motion, noted that then Senator Marco Rubio and Lindsey Graham had pressed in July 2024 for investigation into the groups over concerns about efforts by the Chinese Communist Party and its allies to sow discord in the United States. You know what? In the past, the State Department would have revoked his citizenship. No, really, even if he's born in the United States, with 10 generations of American ancestors, it wouldn't matter. It wouldn't matter. if you did something like this while you were living overseas in the past, your passport would have been taken away. And I explained that when I was a child, as a teenager, when I looked at my passport and in the front cover or something like that, or the first few pages of the passport, it would explain things that you might do that would result in your passport being taken away. And this kind of thing would qualify for that. Anyway, so yeah, this guy, Neville Roy Singham. Shall I ask you to remember him in your prayers? No, I'm not going to do that. Okay. I'm not going to ask. All right. You can figure it out for yourself. Okay. Yes, but what was it? Yeah, I gave a sermon last month where I quoted Father as saying, "Don't pray for the destruction of your enemies." So I cannot ask you to do this. All right, gotta go. Tomorrow is Wednesday. We'll do OSTP tomorrow. God bless. God bless. Godspeed. May His kingdom come quickly.